What's up, Awakened Atlas? It's Ryan, and today I'm going to be telling a life story about how I almost died in Morocco back in the fall of 2017. For those of you that already are subscribed to Awakened Atlas, you'll know that about a month back, I uploaded a separate life story video about how I almost died in Morocco in 2014. So for those of you that are new to my channel and haven't seen my content before, I definitely recommend checking out that video as well, and you can find a link to it in the description below. So 2014 and 2017, I almost died in the same country twice over the span of 3 years. And back in 2014, it was a food poisoning related situation, and I basically had to be airlifted to a hospital back in Barcelona. I was there for a few days, and then I didn't shit normally for probably 3 or 4 months afterwards. A lot of people probably wouldn't have gone back to a country where they had such a traumatic experience, especially as quickly as I did. But to be honest, apart from, almost dying, which of course was terrible, the rest of my time in Morocco back in 2014 was incredible. Honestly, I'd have to say it was one of the most magical experiences that I had ever had in my life at that point. I was only 20 years old at the time, and I was studying abroad. Leading up to my study abroad experience, I hadn't really traveled all that much. It was definitely a year of firsts for me, and going to Morocco specifically, I was stepping into a culture that was completely different from my own. I remember specifically the thing that I took away the most from the experience was the sheer beauty of the Sahara Desert and like this insane sense of freedom that I felt just driving across the Moroccan countryside in this bus for hours on end, driving over the Atlas Mountains and being connected with nature and this landscape that was so unique and so foreign to me. So these are the things that really drew me back to the country and made it easy to forget how the trip had ended in 2014. I remember the way that the country made me feel, how incredibly happy and alive I felt when I was there. And when I was going to be going back in 2017, I wasn't going to be doing it alone. I was going to be joined by my girlfriend at the time, Sarah, and I wanted her to be able to see the country, be able to feel the way that I felt when I was there, and I wanted us to be able to experience these things together. The plan for the trip was actually to start our trip in southern Spain and kind of work our way down to Morocco from there. We had a flight on the way there. It was on Royal Air Morocco, and we actually went direct from JFK to Casablanca, Morocco, and then we connected through there to Malaga, Spain, which is a city in the south of Spain. So basically the reason that we did this is because the flight was way cheaper than going direct into Casablanca or going direct into Malaga. So it was New York to Malaga, via Casablanca, and then on the way back, Casablanca to New York. So I actually have on my phone the exact day that we left and the exact day that we got into Malaga. I can show you guys this actually if you want to take a look. When I travel is I actually build out a Google Doc where I'll kind of call out day by day what the plans are for a trip, and it really gives you something to get excited about, and you can do research about which Airbnbs or which hotels you're going to stay in or which activities you're going to do on a city by city basis. So it's going to be good for this story because I can kind of use that to recap where I was and exactly the timing and how it all played out. We got into Malaga late in the afternoon on September 22nd. I think it was around maybe 4 p.m. I think our flight was delayed when we were coming from Casablanca. We took a cab, we went to our Airbnb. Our Airbnb was really, really cheap. It was just a room basically, but it was really close to the beach. I think it was probably around $40. So by the time we got our bags unpacked, kind of got settled in, it was probably around like 5:36 and the sun was going to be going down within an hour. So we looked how close the beach was. It was probably only about maybe a 5, 6, 7 minute walk. So we decided to walk over to the beach, and I remember how relaxing it was. There wasn't many people there. Because of the time of year that we went, and we kind of picked this specifically in late September, it's kind of past the high season, so it wasn't super crowded there, yet the weather was still really good. We saw these little parakeets in the trees. Obviously you're kind of reminded that it's a very tropical area when you see that. We were going to be spending 2 days in Malaga, so we got in that day. We had another full day. The day after that, we'd be driving down via a bus to Marbella, which is around, like I mentioned, an hour and a half. I remember looking out the left side window of the bus when we were heading down on the bus from Malaga to Marbella and seeing the most incredible sunset that I have ever seen over the ocean. Honestly, in Marbella, we had the most amazing Airbnb. It was around $200 a night, so we were paying a little bit more for it, but it was definitely well worth it. We had this balcony that overlooked the Mediterranean Sea. I remember waking up in the morning to watch the sunrise, going for runs along this path that kind of ran along the water as well. We went out both of the nights that we were in Marbella. All of the best like discotecas. There was this guy that was up on the bar playing a saxophone. It was a really fun time. I definitely recommend a visit to Marbella if you guys can do it in the future. So our relaxing time in Spain came and went, and it was September 25th at this point, and it was time to make our way down to the African continent and Morocco. I remember looking out on my balcony the morning of the 25th and looking at the Mediterranean Sea, and I was like, Here we go. Today's the day. Today's the day. We're crossing the Mediterranean. We're going into Africa. We're going on this adventure, and it's going to be very similar, maybe even better than my trip back in 2014. So I was looking through my old travel itinerary earlier today, and I saw that our plans for the day in terms of travel were pretty aggressive. We had to get from Marbella down to Tarifa, so there was a bus that we were supposed to take. Anyway, this is kind of where things started to come off the rails a little bit. It kind of was a sign of things that were to come. We missed the bus that was supposed to take us down to Tarifa, so we ended up getting a cab that ended up being way more expensive. I think it was probably 3 or 4 times more expensive than the bus, but we're like, whatever, you know, we missed the bus, we want to get this ferry, because the ferry was supposed to leave at 3 p.m. In hindsight, I'm not really sure why I decided to get a ferry that late in the day, because we had to check in with the rental car agency. I think that they were closing at 5 p.m. So anyway, we finally got down to the port in Tarifa. We boarded the ferry. So we got on at 3 p.m. and the scheduled arrival is actually 3 p.m. as well. This is due to the fact that there's a time difference. So it's kind of cool because when you go across, it's an hour-long ferry ride to Tangier. And once you get there, you basically wasted no time at all. And I remember the entire ferry ride over, I was like super pumped. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to Morocco. Like, let's do this. The adventure is beginning. We had our chill time in Spain, and now it's time to drive across the entire country and go to all these really cool cities. I think we had about 20 hours of driving ahead of us over the course of 6 or 7 days. So needless to say, I was pretty pumped. So the boat arrived, we were in Tangier, we jumped off the boat, and then we checked in with the gate agent or the customs agent. Basically what he said is, you guys need to go back on the boat because you were supposed to check in with the customs agent on the boat and he was supposed to stamp our passports there. I was confused when I was on the boat. I was too busy, celebrating and getting all excited. I didn't realize, I saw all these people that were in line. I'm like, what are they waiting in line for? Like food or something like that? They weren't waiting for food, so they were actually getting their passports stamped and validated, so when we arrived in the country, they can just hop off the boat and go. So we went back, we checked in with the passport guy, and he actually wasn't there, so that was already kind of the first delay that we experienced. So the customs agent finally came back. He checked our documents, but it kind of delayed us at this point, probably 45 minutes or an hour. And then me and Sarah, we got our bags, we got our suitcases, and we're just walking across the pier. Out of nowhere, we didn't even see this guy. We looked over to our left and we saw this guy that had slick back hair. He had a really fresh, nice looking suit on, and he had these really nice designer sunglasses. Me and Sarah ended up calling him Moroccan Hollywood guy or Moroccan George Clooney, and he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? How are you? And we're like, we're doing well. And he's like, well, you guys probably need a cab, don't you? And we're like, actually, we do need a cab. He's like, well, come with me, go with my people, go with my people. And I was like, okay. And he kind of just swooped us off our feet and got us into a cab, and it all happened very fast. It took us about a mile to the rental car agency. We probably could have walked, but we were kind of ready to get there at this point. So I think it was around 4 p.m. and we needed to get there at 5 at the latest to pick up our car. There was basically just one dude at this Hertz rental location that was running the show, and it was really taking a long time until we were actually finally helped. I remember going through all of the paperwork. When I was back in the States, I actually had to apply and get an international driver's license just to be eligible for driving outside of the United States, specifically in Morocco. So there was definitely a lot that went into this, and it's not really something that Western tourists typically do in third world countries. So finally I finished filling out all the paperwork, and the guy that was running the Hertz location walked me over to a small parking lot where the car that we were going to be renting was waiting for us. I remember distinctly, it was actually a Citroen Cactus. Citroen is a French brand. The Cactus was a small mid-size SUV slash crossover, so I thought it would be a good car to get. When we're going out into the desert, you want something a little bit more sturdy than a small compact car. Really, when I think about Hertz locations, I think about the ones in the United States that are in big airports. So basically it's a massive parking lot with a ton of cars available. This was very different. So Tangier in general, and a lot of the larger cities in Morocco, there's not really traffic laws when it comes to the way that traffic flows within the cities, or if there are traffic laws, they aren't really enforced. People kind of just go when they want to go. This was the only car that was available to be rented from this specific location. They might have only had an inventory of 2 or 3 cars. So basically what I had to do is I started the car. Before I did anything, I got lots of pictures of the car because, this is the first time I'm renting a car in a third world country. It might have been the second time ever that I've actually rented a car. I wanted to make sure that prior, if there was any damage, that it was documented. So we had our vehicle, but before I could get going, I had to drive back over to the Hertz location because the parking lot that this guy walked me over to was about a half mile from the location where we had checked in and where we had filled out all the different paperwork. Sarah was waiting back at the rental car agency with her suitcases, so I remember driving the car over, trying to find my way there. So once I finally got there was no parking lot, there was nowhere on the side to pull over, so I kind of just made my way over to the side as much as possible, but I was right in the middle of the intersection and I put my flashers on. As soon as I did that, all of these cars start honking their horns at me at once. There's like people with their hands out the window, they're like going like this, they're yelling, and I'm like, Sarah, get the bags, like let's go, let's go. So I put the car in park, I got out of the car, and then I helped get the suitcases into the back. I waved goodbye to the guy that, you know, helped us get on our way. So Sarah finally got in the car and we got going, and then it was just like, wow, if this is any insight or any inkling of what the trip's gonna be like, this is gonna be pretty wild. Despite all that mayhem, we weren't really all that fazed by it. We were still extremely excited, so we had about a 2-hour drive until we got to Chefchaouen. You may know Chefchaouen from Instagram or lots of different articles that have been written about it. It's known as the Blue City. All of the walls throughout the entire city are painted blue. Sarah was going to be doing the navigating, I was going to be doing the driving. We didn't have access to the internet when we were down in Morocco, so what we would do is when we were on the Wi-Fi, we put in the directions in Google Maps for where we had to go. We can kind of follow along on the map because it'll still track your GPS location even if it doesn't have connection to the internet. Just when we thought when we were going to be on our way, within 3 miles of leaving the rental car agency, the car engine completely shut off and I had to basically move my car over to the side of the road. Luckily there was an area where I was able to do that. This error message came on the middle of the screen that I'm assuming it said check engine or something like that, but I couldn't actually read it because it was in French. And we're like, okay, what do we do? You know, the rental car agency we thought was probably closed at this point already. We'd only made it 3 miles. We needed to make it over 1,000 miles over the course of the upcoming days. We didn't have any access to the internet. We looked at the manual and the Hertz information that was in the glove compartment. We didn't get anything from that. All of that was in French as well. So we're like, okay, like our best bet is to probably try to get back to the rental car agency. But at this point, we were about 3 miles down the road and we probably had made about 3 or 4 turns. We're like, hope we can get back, and I hope that guy's still there. We were able to eventually get back. I don't know how we did. We had to do it based on our intuition alone because we had no directions, we had no insight in how to get there. So we finally got back to the rental car agency and we told the guy, we're like, hey man, like the car broke down. So after some deliberation with the guy that was running the rental car agency, he's like, okay, like I'll have my mechanic check it out. I'll have him drive it. You guys can go in the car with him and kind of explain what's going on. As the mechanic was driving the car, it seemed to be driving okay, and I was communicating with the mechanic through Spanish, so I'm relatively proficient in Spanish. I wouldn't say that I'm fluent. The languages that he spoke, he didn't speak any English. He spoke Arabic, he spoke French, and he had a very limited understanding of Spanish. So we were kind of just going back and forth in Spanish, and he's like saying, oh, you know, the car's good, you guys should be fine. And I continued to say that we were uncomfortable, we were driving over the Atlas Mountains, we had a really far way to go, and we'd like to get another car if possible. So finally, he drove us back. This was probably about 30 minutes later. The sun was already down at this point, and we talked to the guy that was running the rental car agency, and we're like, look man, like, you know, what can you do? We have to get to Chefchaouen. Is there anything else that can be done? So he's like, okay, like, I understand. Don't worry about it. I have another car for you guys, but we don't have any other cars here. So it's actually at the airport location, which is gonna be about a 25-30 minute drive. So we're like, okay, so how can we get to the airport? Oh yeah, sure, no problem. So you're just gonna go down, you're gonna go past those 2 lights, you're gonna make a left, and then after that, you just follow the flow. So we looked at me and Sarah looked at each other. We're like, follow the flow? We're like, are we gonna make it over to the airport? It wasn't the most detailed of directions. So once we got there, the Hertz agent, thankfully, was actually waiting outside of the airport. He knew that we were coming. He was aware of the situation, and we had to get through security because in order to get into the airport, you have to be a ticketed passenger. And as I mentioned in my video about my trip to Morocco in 2014, they're really big on counterterrorism. So they had to check us very thoroughly. There were 3 or 4 armed guards. We had to go through a metal detector. They had AK-47 assault rifles. They basically looked like soldiers. So we went past there, we got through, we got into the Hertz location, and the gentleman that I was speaking to there, he actually didn't speak any English or any Spanish whatsoever. And he basically was just saying things to me in French. We filled out the paperwork associated with this car. I again took pictures of it. I took a picture in front of the car that you guys can see up on the screen. Eventually, after a very broken hand signal type of conversation, he gave us the information and we were gonna be on our way heading over to Chefchaouen. GPS said it was gonna take just over 2 2 hours, it probably took close to like 3.5, 4 hours, because the route that it was taking us, I guess that time was based on the fact that you could drive 50, 55 miles per hour, which you could for certain portions. However, the kind of major road that we were on turned into a very rural country road. You basically couldn't go any faster than like 15, 20 miles per hour, because part of the road was concrete and another part of the road was basically just gravel, and there'd be certain sections where parts of the road would be just like falling off to the side. I noticed that we were going up in elevation at times, and at one point I saw that there definitely was a cliff off to the right. I remember stopping at this very random obscure rest stop somewhere in between Tangier and Chefchaouen, and we were definitely the only Westerners, the only white people there, and everyone was giving us like the weirdest of looks while we were stopping. Finally got there at 12:30, 1 a.m. and we just passed out immediately. The next morning, after we got a good night's sleep, we woke up, had breakfast at our hotel on this outdoor patio area, and you can overlook in the distance, there's this mountain in the background, and you can look out to the right and you can see the entire blue city from this kind of scenic overlook area. We were planning on walking around and just kind of exploring the city at our own pace, because we're only going to be in Chefchaouen for one day before we had to hop back in the car and drive 3.5 hours to the south, where we'd be going to Fes, which is one of the cities that I had a really good experience in when I traveled there back in 2014. One thing that me and Sarah noticed as we were walking around the city was that there really weren't too many tourists there. And although you see the photos of Chefchaouen plastered across Instagram, for the most part, it's not as big of a tourist city as Fes in the south. Of course, we did come across a few other tourists as we were walking around, but the majority of people that we really came into contact with were different vendors that had shops. You know, they were selling things such as like paintings, carpets. People were approaching us extremely aggressively. This one guy came up to us and he's like, "You guys, you gotta come to my shop. Come on, check it out, check it out." And then this other guy came up to him and like confronted him, and they're like, no, you guys don't want to go over there. Like, this guy will rip you off. He'll scam you, he'll scam you. We're like, all right. And then this guy's like, yeah, like, I'll show you guys a good time. I'll show you guys a good time. And we hesitantly kind of followed this guy, and he's like, I'll show you guys, the best place in the city to get a photo. I'll take your guys' photo, and I can show you around. We're like, okay. So he walks us around, and as he's kind of walking, he's talking as well, and he says, yeah, my family, they live up in the mountain, and we have a hashish farm. So hashish is basically the Moroccan weed. It's basically like a very potent, strong weed that they're known for in this region of Morocco specifically. And he's like, yeah, we have a hashish farm up there. I could take you guys up in the back of my pickup truck. And I was like, all right, this already sounds like a little bit sketchy. But he's like, you could have tea with my family. You can buy some hashish, no pressure. And then he kept saying, no mafia, no mafia. And I'm like, dude, we never were like considering that you were in the mafia. Also, I'm not really familiar with the Moroccan mafia, but he kept saying, no mafia, no mafia. Honestly, I was considering it. It was probably like 3:30, 4 p.m. at this point. But at the same time, we were a little bit anxious. Sarah was particularly anxious about getting to the next city because we did have a 3.5 hour drive ahead of us, and we didn't want a repeat of last night when we were on these small, very remote roads. And he's like, yeah, if you guys want to go back to the hotel and like make a decision, that's totally fine. So we got back to the hotel. Sarah's like, Ryan, like I really want to get going. I want to get to the next city. I don't want it to be anything like what we saw last night. So I was like, all right, no problem. And she's like, yeah, that guy's like kind of sketchy as well. Like, I don't really want to go in his pickup truck. And I was like, all right, I understand. Like, we can get going. So I went back outside to talk to the guy, and I was like, hey man, like, I appreciate you like showing us around. I wanted to give you some money. I was going to offer him, the equivalent of 10 euros just for taking us around and talking to us and, taking pictures and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, like, this is a disgrace. Like, how could you do this? How could you only offer me, 100 dirham? You need to go inside and get a lot more money, or you're gonna have problems. And I'm like, look, man, like, you were being nice to us. You're coming up to us. You're having us walk around. And, my girlfriend decided that we don't want to go up to the hashish farm. We really have to get going. It has nothing to do with you. It just has to do with the fact that we want to get to the next city. And then he started screaming at me, he started cursing at me, and basically telling me that if we didn't go inside and get more money, that he knows a lot of people in Morocco and he was going to make sure that we had problems. And I didn't really think he would do anything or had the capabilities of hurting us or actually knew as many people in Morocco as he said he did, but you never know with those type of things. So I went back into the hotel and I was like, Sarah, we probably should get going. Like, let's get our things and get out of Chefchaouen. We made it into Fes okay. It was like a 3.5 hour drive. We were gonna be spending 2 days in Fes, and we actually stayed at this really nice place. It was called the Riad La Russa. It was right in the heart of the Fes Medina, and for, I think it was around $130 or $140 a night, we were pretty much treated like royalty. So we honestly had a really good time in Fes. We did a little walking tour of the Medina. We went into a lot of the different shops that are run by the local artisans. So after Fes, after the 2 days that we spent there, there, the next city on our itinerary was Merzouga, where we'd be staying in a desert camp. So basically to get to Merzouga, it's a 7-hour drive over the Atlas Mountains. The morning that we were supposed to leave, both myself and Sarah, our stomachs weren't really feeling so well, and I was already being extremely cautious and also making Sarah very cautious of what she was eating, just, due to the fact that I did get really sick the last time that I was there. And we were a little bit hesitant just given the way that we were feeling, and we didn't want to be out in the middle of nowhere and start to get really sick. So we weren't really sick yet, but we thought we could get to the point where we were. So we kind of made the executive decision at the last minute prior to driving out to Merzouga that we were going to divert. We were going to change our plans, and the desert camp that we were staying in, we actually didn't have to pay any deposit. We were going to be paying in cash, in full, once we got there. So I sent them an email and I just said that, we're not feeling well, we're not going to be able to make it, and it wasn't a problem at all. So what we decided to do was drive 2 hours and 15 minutes to the west to the city of Rabat, which is actually the capital of Morocco. And it's a beautiful city that's right on the coast, and it's relatively close to Casablanca. So what we did is we spent one night in Rabat, and then we actually arrived to Casablanca one day prior to what we had originally intended. So when we got to Casablanca, what we had planned and what we wanted to do is we were actually staying at the Four Seasons at the end of our trip for 2 nights. So the reason that we wanted to do this, obviously the Four Seasons is very different than our $40 budget Airbnb in Malaga, but the main reason we wanted to do it is because we knew we were going to be really tired. We were going to be doing a lot of driving and staying at what we thought were not going to be the most nice places throughout the week. So we wanted to just be able to relax and enjoy our time in Casablanca, go to the beach, just kind of chill for the last couple days. So what I did is I called the Four Seasons, and we were actually able to move in a day earlier. So the plan at this point then was to go to Rabat, spend a day there, and then to spend 3 days in Casablanca. So by the time we got to Casablanca, me and Sarah were both feeling better. I remember one night in Rabat, we were actually able to find like a pizza spot. So we had pizza and beer because we've been eating the local Moroccan food the entire week that probably our stomachs weren't super used to. And a night out in Rabat with pizza and beer was all it took for our stomachs to be feeling totally fine again. So when we got to Casablanca, we thought, okay, we've been through the worst of it. Now we're at the Four Seasons, and we're just gonna be able to enjoy the last few days of our trip. For the next couple of days, we were really just chilling, kind of exploring the city by day, watching the sunset over the Atlantic Ocean in the evening. Our hotel that we were staying in actually let out immediately onto the public beach, so we definitely spent a lot of time out there. So anyway, on the night of September 30th, we decided to go out to dinner, and we just kind of looked on our phones prior to going, and we saw a place that was pretty highly rated. It was in the center of the city, and we kind of wanted to get away from the resort, because we just chilled at the resort the entire first day because we were so tired from all the traveling that we had been doing. So we walked over. It was pretty far, probably like 30-40 minute walk, and it was probably one of the top 10 places in the city. The restaurant that we went to actually didn't have menus that were in English. They had menus that were in Arabic and menus that were in French. So we decided to take the French one. I speak some Spanish, Sarah speaks some Italian. We figured we might be able to decipher it, and luckily we saw that they also had Wi-Fi. One of the things that I saw, at least according to Google Translate, on the menu was mahi-mahi, which is a fish that is pretty common in the United States. I had it many times before, and I didn't really think anything of it. I was, by the ocean, so I figured I would get some seafood. So we ate our dinner. We each also had a bottle of the local Casablanca beer and had a very good conversation. Generally, it was a really, really good night. So we finished the dinner. We were probably there for a pretty long period of time, so we were just like talking afterwards, and eventually started to work our way back to the hotel. We got back to the hotel around probably 9:45, 10 p.m., and we were pretty tired. We had been out in the sun a lot, and when you go out in the sun, you kind of just want to lay down. So I laid down in the bed. I think we put the TV on, and then about 10 minutes later I started to feel like a weird sensation in my throat, and I wasn't really sure what it was because I had never felt anything quite like it. It was almost as if there was something that was like preventing my airway from being completely clear. And I had thought back to the fish that I had earlier that night, and it was a full fish. If you guys remember the photo that I put up on the screen, first of all, it definitely wasn't mahi-mahi. That was something that I immediately recognized, but I've never had any allergic reaction to anything in my entire life, so it wasn't something that I really even considered. What we found out was that the fish that I had ate was actually sea bream, and the fish had all the different bones in it. I thought maybe there was like a bone that was stuck in my throat that was like clogging up my airway at first, and I wasn't like too concerned, but I was just trying to like cough almost so I could try to get out the bone that I thought was in my throat. So I was feeling generally uncomfortable for the next 10 to 15 minutes, and it also seemed like it was getting progressively worse. The amount of air that I was able to breathe, my throat was getting even more constricted, and Sarah was asking, do you think we should go get help, or do you think you want to lay down? Like, how bad is it? Like, what do you think would be the best thing to do? Pretty quickly made the decision decision. I was like, I think we need to do something about this. This doesn't seem right. I'm definitely not a hypochondriac or someone that will overreact when I have something health related that's going on, and I feel like I generally have a pretty good sense for my body. So I was like, all right, let's go to the front desk. I think it would make the most sense for me to go to the hospital and see exactly what's going on, because I'm really struggling to breathe right now. So what we did is we went to the front desk, and luckily the hotel that we were staying in was the Four Seasons, which is an American hotel brand. So everyone spoke fluent English there, thankfully, because if we were at one of the other accommodations that we were staying in earlier in the week, or if we were in a city that wasn't as developed, it might have been a different scenario. So once we got to the front desk, they told us that they didn't recommend going to the hospital, the emergency rooms. You could be waiting a very long time, but thankfully, again, because it was a nice hotel, they actually had a doctor on call. So they had a doctor that was going to be coming over. They said, I'll probably be here in like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. We have a guy that will be able to come over and check you out. So I was like, okay. I didn't want to go back to the room. I kind of wanted to be out where other people were in case, you know, something happened or there was some type of complication. So at this point, we were basically just sitting in the lobby. So 30 minutes go by, 40 minutes go by. It took well over an hour for the doctor to actually show up at the hotel. And during this time period, I was not really taking it so well. I was trying to just breathe and be calm, but at the same time, I was probably only getting about 10-15% of the amount of oxygen that I'm used to getting, and I started to feel like I was starting to lose consciousness as well. And I remember just looking over at Sarah with just like the sheer look of terror on my face, thinking, am I gonna pass out right now and then ultimately die? Like, are these the last sights that I'm ever going to see? So once the doctor finally showed up, one thing to note is that he didn't speak any English whatsoever. So everything that he was saying was being relayed by the hotel staff that was helping us out. And honestly, shout out to the Four Seasons hotel staff. Like, I don't know if I'd still be here today if it wasn't for them and being able to act as quickly as they did. So basically what the doctor told me was that I was having an allergic reaction to something that I had ate, and that's the reason that my throat was closing up and I was basically going into, you know, anaphylactic shock. The only thing I could think of that was outside of the norm in terms of what I had ate that evening was this fish, this sea bream, which I had never had before. So I'm thinking it had to be either the fish or one of the spices on the fish or some of the other food that we had. But at the end of the day, I'm never gonna really know exactly what happened. So basically the doctor injected me in the butt with cortisol, gave me a really high dose of prednisone, told me to take another really high dose the next day as well. So the swelling stopped, and physiologically my body was okay at this point. The doctor left and I was just kind of laying in my bed, but even though I was doing okay physiologically, mentally I definitely wasn't doing well at all, because I kind of had come to the conclusion that, oh my God, this is gonna be the night where I might actually die, when I was basically going into anaphylactic shock just a little bit earlier. So needless to say, I barely slept at all that night. I think my body was finally just so tired that I passed out at like 3:30, 4 a.m. And then the next day we got up at like 10 a.m., 10:30 a.m. and I remember we just ordered breakfast to the room. I was like, I'm like so freaked out right now. Like, I just want to be very careful. This the day that we woke up, it was October 1st at this point, and we were scheduled to leave from Casablanca direct back to JFK the next day on October 2nd. So Sarah's like, you know, what do you want to do today? Do you want to go out and do anything? Do you want to just hang out here? And to be honest, I kind of wanted to get out, and we had already planned on going to the Hassan Mosque, which is, I believe, the largest mosque in the world in terms of height, which is in Casablanca. So we walked over there, we went to the mosque, and I was feeling a little bit better. I was still kind of freaked out, and despite this, the day honestly seemed like it was going pretty well. So we got back to the mosque in the afternoon at like 3 p.m. or so, and then I remember we changed, we went down to the pool, and things were going pretty well. And then all of a sudden I just felt this very strange feeling come over me, this feeling of like intense sadness that I had never felt before, and I just started crying uncontrollably at the pool, and I didn't understand where it was coming from. And I was bringing up all this nonsense, and I'm trying to even remember what I was bringing up, but I was very sad about nothing in specific. It was the weirdest sensation I had ever felt in my entire life. All these people were around, and I'm like, Sarah, like, we need to go to the beach. Like, we need to go to the beach. I can't just be like crying hysterically in front of all of these people. So we go out to the beach, and there was no one out there, and I guess I felt that I could let it all out, and I started going off about all this stuff, like all the things that I had like messed up or things that I had done wrong in my life, and I was just crying, like bawling hysterically, and I had no idea why I was doing it. Within a few minutes of crying, like, and letting all of these tears out, it just changed to laughter immediately, and I started laughing hysterically. Everything was the most funniest thing that I had ever heard in my entire life, and I was getting really scared. I'm like, why am I laughing? It was completely uncontrollable. All of a sudden, I just wanted to start running. I don't know why, but I did, and I just started sprinting around the beach, literally like a crazy person. I wanted to get out of my body body is the best way that I can describe it, because I wanted to get away from the way that I was feeling inside. So I finally was able to calm down. I guess I had convinced myself, I had come to the conclusion that this is just caused by the drugs in my body, because obviously I've never experienced anything like that my entire life. But I calmed down. We went back to the room. We decided very wisely just to go to dinner at the hotel. And I remember when we sat down, immediately upon sitting down, I just started having a panic attack, which is something that I've never had my entire life. And I remember at the moment I was extremely worried that my throat was going to close up, or that it already was closing up, or that I was going to go through that feeling of not being able to breathe again. Thankfully, the only place that was going to happen at this point was in my own mind. So I survived Morocco. We made it to the airport the next day, returned the rental car. There was no issues with the rental car, got on the plane, got home. And then unfortunately, when I got back to the States, I was still having like post-traumatic stress disorder that was related to what had happened. There'd be instances often when I was about ready to eat where I felt like my throat was closing up and I couldn't breathe. And it was all things that were made up in my own head. So this experience and what happened, just a year and a half ago definitely really scarred me. I think that I've grown a lot as an individual through this experience, and thankfully I'm still here today to be able to tell you guys this story. In no way am I saying that a story like this should deter you guys from traveling the world and following your dreams. I know that for me, it definitely hasn't deterred me. I feel like I'm more determined to do so now more than I ever have been before. Stuff happens, you move on, you get past it, and if you're still alive and thinking about it, well, hey, you're still alive, and that's definitely a good thing. So that about wraps up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.